So that was one of my paintings called Kings of Kings. And it just reminded me of the season that I'm currently in. You know, I'm reading the book of Job, and it's very interesting because I've read the book of Job a couple of times, and every single time I read it, I learn something new. And so in 2022, I had lost my baby sister, and I had lost my mother, and a month ago I lost my grandpa. And one of the reasons why I like the book of Job is because he's lost so much in such a short amount of time that I don't think anyone can really compare to how much he lost. Not only did he lose 10 kids, but he also lost properties. He lost all his cattle, so all his assets. And one of the things that the devil was banking on was that even though he's losing all these things and his health is deteriorating, that he's banking that no matter what, Job is going to curse God, because he's banking on this love that Job has for God, this integrity that Job has is based off of his blessings, is based off of what he has. And God is proving, and Job is also proving, that their relationship is deeper than his assets, is deeper than his children, is deeper than what he has. And so that begs the question of any Christian, that begs the question of any Christ follower, is how deep is your relationship with God? Do you know that his love and his sovereignty goes past what we have? God is the only God that can give and that can take away. So even when things are not going your way, even when you are in pain, even when you are confused and you don't know what's going to happen next, or you don't know what God is doing in behind the scenes, do you love God to know that no matter what, he is still worthy of all the praise? Even when you're not in a situation that you want to be in, are you aware that that doesn't take away from God's sovereignty? It doesn't take away from God's holiness. It doesn't take away from God's goodness. That no matter what, he is still worthy of all the praise. He is still majesty. He is still sitting on his throne. He is still amazing. He still loves us even when we don't understand. There's always still purpose in the pain. And I think that is one of the things that us followers have an issue with. When things are not going our way, when things are confusing, when things are falling apart, we tend to blame God for the bad things that happen. And one of the verses, when his wife is talking to him and she's like, just curse God and die. Because she was trying to understand why Job was still having this love for God. And Job was like, why should we only accept the good things from God? Why can't we accept the bad things from God? And that is Job living in a wisdom that a lot of Christians don't have. There is goodness that comes from God, and sometimes there's pain. Sometimes God will allow pain to happen to us also. But are we aware that there's also purpose that happens in that pain? So see it like this, okay? So, when we have parents and we're in trouble and we have authority, there's also, there's always discipline. There's always consequences. There's always consequences to our actions, right? So when we think about when we've gotten in trouble, we got our phone taken away, where we couldn't go outside that day, or we're grounded for that week, we don't stay mad at our parents. We don't blame our parents for disciplining us, because in a way we understand why we're in trouble. We understand why our phone got taken away, because it's the consequence. And so a lot of times people, Christians, they become mad at God because there were certain things that had to transpire in our life that we don't like, that causes pain, that causes loss, that causes, a lot of emotions that we don't like. But we also have to come to the conclusion that not only good things come from God, just like a parent, and we're going to have to come to the conclusion and understand that there's always purpose in it. There's no such thing as coincidence. There's always good things that happen to it, come from that pain. And that understanding, that wisdom comes from having a type of intimacy, a type of deep relationship with the Lord. And so that's why I always question people when, they left the church, or they stopped praying, they stopped talking to God, and their excuses is, oh well, I was being used by a pastor, or I was hurt by people in the church. And there's this show called there's only one season, but there's this show called 1,000 Pound Roommates, I think. And I was so irritated with one of the women because her, she came from a church cult or whatever, and she blames her pain from her mother. She doesn't pray no more. She doesn't talk to God no more. And it was funny because her mom even asked her, well, how come you don't pray no more? How come you don't go to church no more? How come you don't, how come you stopped your relationship with God if your issue is with the people and not God himself? And I felt like that just went over her head. Like she didn't actually digest her mom's question, because it was a good question. It was a question to cause her to think, why did you stop your relationship with God? If your issue wasn't with God, it was with the pastor. It was with your mom. It was with the pain and the trauma that came from those people and not from God. And that is something I always ask people all the time, because a lot of people use that excuse. Oh, I was hurt by the people of the church. I was hurt by the pastor. I was hurt by a cousin. I was hurt by a sister. All this that has to do with people, but not God. And so that tells me you didn't actually have a relationship with God. You weren't actually in, love with God. You weren't actually having an intimacy, deep relationship with God, because it's not, if you have that relationship with God, then you're not going to allow other things to get in the way of your worship. You're not going to allow other things to get in the way of your love and your sovereignty and your respect and your obedience to the Lord. And so, again, it goes back to, you need to have that relationship with God. You need to understand his voice. You need to understand his character. You need to read the word for yourself and have this relationship and his understanding through the Holy Spirit, and not just through the pastor, and not just through what you hear other people are saying, but for yourself. Have a relationship for yourself. So when you go through trials and tribulations, you know that there's purpose. Even when we don't understand, even when we are in pain, even when we are hurt, even when we don't like the situation, it still doesn't take away that God is always worthy of praise. He's always holy, always good, always showing up for us, always making sure, that we aren't physically hurt or we aren't harmed, because even though he was allowing the devil to test Job, he still gave the devil, parameters. But don't hurt him, but don't kill him, spare his life. Because at the end of the day, God still loves us. He still wants a relationship with us. So how deep is your relationship with the Lord? Do you have intimacy? Do you understand his character? Do you know that there's always purpose, even in the pain?